And that meant every Friday my mother would drive him to the airport and he'd get on a plane and fly to Poughkeepsie or Orlando or Paris and conduct a stake conference. And he'd
Oh.
come home on Sunday night. My mom would hang his suit out in the wind to air out all the cigarette smoke. And, we never saw him. I don't belabor that point, but I didn't have a dad that was home.
Yeah.
He was always out helping, members of the church and non-members of the church. He was serving.
Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in Mormons. It's a twin siblings interview edition. I'm your host, Matt, and I'm with
Melissa. Yes, were you waiting for me to say I'm your host, Melissa?
Yeah, you always wait for me to say your name, and I thought,
yeah,
well,
I think
say her name.
I think you do a good job at the introduction. You know your name, you know how to pronounce it. You're very good at it. Yeah, today we've got a great interview guest on.
Yeah, we're interviewing Richard Hanks today. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm 6'6", about 320.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Trying to get down.
You're a bodybuilder?
I don't know what you want to know. Let's see. 64 years old, married. My wife's better than I am, as usual.
Perfect.
3 kids, 11 grandkids. Grew up in Salt Lake. Dragged her all over the country. We made our way back eventually, about 24 years ago now, which is hard to believe.
Back to Salt Lake?
Uh-huh. And we lived in Chicago and then Dallas and then Maryland and raised our kids mostly in Maryland. They have these fabulous 11 grandkids, which are best part of our lives, I guess.
How old were you?
I worked in business. I worked in large business and small business, and I don't know what else.
We got lots of questions for you already.
Yeah,
first...
I was a basketball player, tennis ball. Can't go to my left. Not a great rebounder. Love my wood shop. I've got I spent a lot of time in my wood shop now that I'm retired, and in the last 3 years writing a book about my dad.
And your dad is Marion D. Hanks?
Marion D. Hanks.
Okay, so we're going to ask you about the book, but I first want to start with questions about your relationship with your dad, because how old were you when he was called to be a general authority?
Let's see. I was -8.
Oh, so it was your entire life. Your dad was a general authority.
My dad was a general authority my entire life. He was I may not get this right. He was the youngest general authority, I think, since Oliver Cowdery.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And there was nobody younger. There's never been anybody. He was 31.
Wow.
And my mom was 27. They had 2 little girls, my 2 oldest sisters. And they, my whole life. So that's all I ever knew until he passed away.
So what does that mean to be a general authority? Because I think it can mean a few different things. Does that mean that he was retired from everything except church service, or what does that look like?
Sure. It means his family never saw him.
Yeah.
To be honest. Well, a general authority is called to be a leader in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In those days, particularly when he was called in 1953, what did it mean? Well, I'll put it in human terms first. And then,
yeah.
So what do you want to do every Friday at 4? I like doing this. I can ask questions back to the moderator.
I want to go get on the boat and enjoy the outdoors. Yeah, that's what I want to do.
About the weekend. And most people are thinking about, I just turned 64 a while ago, and they're thinking about retirement. Those two things were not a part of his life.
Okay.
Beginning in October of 1953, because all general authorities were called till they died. And that meant every Friday my mother would drive him to the airport and he'd get on a plane and fly to Poughkeepsie or Orlando or Paris and conduct a stake conference.
Oh.
Home on Sunday night. My mom would hang his suit out in the wind to air out all the cigarette smoke. And, we never saw him. I don't belabor that point, but I didn't have a dad that was home.
Yeah.
He was always out helping, members of the church and non-members of the church. He was serving. So general authorities now they're called till they're 70. But none of them are called nobody's called in their 30s anymore. I mean, he'd never been a stake president or a bishop or an elders quorum president or anything. He was just called out of the blue and
Wow.
changed their lives forever.
So these days, I feel like general authorities, their wives travel with them. But when you're 31, you can't drag your wife
No,
and your kids around. Yeah.
no. And people, again, you had mentioned, I can't remember. I've done so many. I think you mentioned that, he finished all these. He hadn't finished anything. He just got out of law school.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were poor, to be blunt. And he was trying to teach seminary at West High, and he was teaching institute at the U, and he was the assistant director of Temple Square. So
Wow.
he was trying to keep 3 jobs going, 2 little kids, keep his wife going. He didn't have a solid background of anything, and then just got called, and it was a blessing in his life, right? I mean, he loved it. It's not really a negative thing necessarily, but I think people quite often in the church don't really get what it means to be a general authority. Even today, they get out at 70 unless they're an apostle, but generally, and like I said, it's mostly positive. It's mostly blessings in our lives, I would say.
I think even today, members of the Quorum of the 70 still every weekend are going to state conferences all around the world. The people I
Yes,
know that
every
are in the
weekend.
70,
Yeah. They get July off, and then they have the occasional break here and there, but it's most every Friday on a plane somewhere and then it's just crazy. Think about your state conference, right? I mean, you see usually 2 meetings. General authorities are in about 8. And if they're choosing a new stake president, it is all day Saturday, all day Sunday until and they're praying and asking the Lord to help them know who the next stake president is. But that was our lives. That's where I grew up. I'm the youngest of 5, and we grew up right off the University of Utah campus.
Well, that's kind of nice. I've also, from what I know, members of the Quorum of the 70 today, they just get different assignments year to year, things that they're supposed to do. So on the weekends, they're gone, but then during the week, they're also keeping like regular business hours, right? Like doing
That's
some
right.
kind of assignment for the church pretty much
I
all
wouldn't
day
say
during the week.
regular. I mean, for some reason, my dad was swarmed with people with problems and issues, and they all are. But he had a specific knack of sort of drawing to him, or people were drawn to him for people that were in some kind of trouble. Today, we would call it maybe faith crisis, social. We would call. I mean, it's different now than then because there were different things. But he was constantly counseling people. So he would finish. They are assigned different things. I mean, he led every one of the departments of the church, and the church has all these different departments that are running all these different things. And when he wasn't doing that, he was assigned to some area of the world. So he would be assigned to the Northeast of the United States, or he was assigned to Southeast Asia. So then he would be on top of everything, flying. Let's take the mid 60s during the Vietnam War. He was flying to Vietnam to go in behind the enemy lines to see the troops. And, and then if he had the Southeast, he's flying to Orlando. So the brethren have this, and by the way, there was 30, 35 total general authorities then. Now there are
Wow.
hundreds of general authorities and
Yeah.
300 or 400 area authorities. And to answer your question, they're not full-time. They usually all keep their jobs, and then they are, spending 5 years being sort of what are called area authorities.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, Melissa.
I was just wondering, now this is a random question, but did he have any sort of influence did you serve a mission? Did he have any sort of influence on where you served?
No, it was,
That would have been fun though.
Which my mission? My mission was terrific. I loved my mission. I loved all my missions. I've spent 7.5 years as a missionary.
Tell me more. Where'd you serve?
Let's see. Well, he was called to be the mission president in Britain,
Oh,
in London, when I was 2.
huh.
Or let's see, 18 months maybe. And then I went on my mission to Scotland, and then I got called as mission president. I just went with my wife. She's the big boss. And we were blessed to go to Alabama.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, I came home one day and he said, we talked about you today. And I said, where? And he said, I excused myself.
Oh, okay.
So then, this is a funny story, actually. Then I haven't told this story in years. I'm down at BYU as a freshman, and my dad calls and says, well, there's a letter here. And then I guess today they send them out by email, but back then,
Yeah.
so I screamed up I-80, I think, or I-15. I think it was maybe going 110. Bad person. And I ran in and opened up my dad's 1040, his IRS. They're the same size. And
Right.
it was sitting on his desk to be mailed. And I was just, anyway, I opened up, it said Scotland. And I looked at him and he said, because we're from Scotland, that's our ancestry. And he looked at me and said, didn't know.
Huh.
Wow.
So,
That's really
and it was
cool.
tough because I thought I was going to go somewhere, Japan or Indonesia or somewhere. And I did well on the language test. So I thought, okay, they'll probably send me to, I don't know, wherever. But you know what? Scotland was the best place
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
for me.
and now Scotland's finally getting their first temple, right? Didn't that just get announced?
Every day on my Facebook, yes. They are overjoyed over
Oh,
there.
that's good. That's
And
good.
shouldn't they be, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so it might be hard for you to compare other kids your age growing up, but you've raised a family of your own now. Is it, did you feel like you missed out on something having your dad as a general authority and
Yeah,
him being gone all the time?
it's a good question. Yeah, I missed out on campouts and fishing, and I don't belabor it. He made up for it. We were big time U basketball fans and BYU basketball and BYU football, and we had a cabin. In July, the general authorities get 2 to 3 weeks off, although he always seemed to have some talk he had to give. But at any rate, we'd go up to the cabin and he taught me how to chop wood and all the things. He was a man. Frankly, he was a man's man. I don't know. He taught. He was an unbelievable athlete. I don't know if you have any interest in that, but he was just incredible. But he taught me all of those things. So he made up for it. He would write us letters, my sisters and I. In fact, a great story. I put this in the book too. Um, one of my companions was ticked off because, excuse me, you get to count hours of studying, right? And so he would say, "This is no fair. You get to read letters from home and count it as hours of study." But he really was good. He would write and call. He did the best he could, given the fact that he was away.
Were there high expectations on you as a youth? Like, were you expected to behave a certain way? All eyes were on you, kind of a thing.
Um, Boy, nobody's asked me that. No, not
Oh.
he. My mom and dad, they expected us to do our best, but there was no. I don't believe there were any heavy expectations on me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Glass House is a good, I think it kept me straight. I think I behaved myself. Some of it was I didn't want. There's a great scripture in Alma that says, "When they saw your conduct, they would not believe my words."
Hmm.
And there was some of that. Honestly, I didn't want to take away from my father's good name. There was the one time in the GM, what's that called?
The
In
Deseret
Las
Gym?
Vegas, the biggest one in Las Vegas.
Oh, a
Grand.
casino? Oh, the Grand.
It's not the Grand American. Well, anyway, large Las Vegas, and we're driving through to California with my buddy, and we're 18. We're out of school, yada yada. We go in, and I'm trying to get some money back. That's the important word, back. And I look up and it says, $1 million jackpot, and I said, well, we got to stop playing this because if I win, Marion B. Hanks' son, this, headlines. So, yeah, there were high expectations. I said this in the book, not a little bit, and I got called to be the asked, I guess called. I got called to be the seminary president when I was a senior in high school. I really wanted to be I wanted to run for class president, but they called me to be seminary president first. And I did what I learned to do then and what I've done since, which is I asked Brother Dave, he's the principal. I was 18. I said, are you doing this because of me? Or are you doing this because of my dad? And he said, he's a good guy, this guy. I called him the other day. I haven't seen him in 40 years. He's like 85. And I said, are you doing this because of me or because of my dad? And he said, we don't work that way here, buddy.
Wow. That's
Now,
good.
having said that, I think that my sisters and I would all say we probably were given unfair advantage here and there. I think it's also safe to say we were probably given unfair teasing or bullying.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I said a lot of fetch and flip and all, and those aren't really great safe words for seniors and juniors in high school. Then everybody would call me flipping Hanks. Which isn't to say that I didn't also swear. I'm not holding myself out as perfect here, but what I'm just saying is that, yeah, it was, everybody knew who my dad was, which is funny because another interesting story. Over time, it went from, so the sentence would always be, "Are you?" And when I was 16, it was Marion D. Hanks' son. And when I was like 35, it changed over to Tom Hanks's brother.
Is
And
this
now I'm
where the
60.
rumor that he's LDS started? Did
Yeah,
it start with you?
no, because he hates us, according to the thing I
Right.
saw.
According, yeah.
Anyway, it got to somewhere in my 50s or 60s. There's somebody named Colin Hanks. I don't even know who that is, but I'm always asked, "Are you?" So for years it was, "Are you?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm his son." And then for a while it became, "Are you?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm his son." And they'd say, "Tom Hanks is your son?" And to be honest, nowadays, I mean, my dad became an emeritus general authority 32 years ago. A lot of people that don't even know. And plus, he was very young when he was called and then very old when he died. So most of the people I would like to have interviewed him for the book have passed away. So,
Well, so I also wonder about this, and it might say more about me than it does about anything else, but my youngest right now is a senior in high school, and on a regular basis he tells me if I were a better parent, the things that I would do for him that would be different in life.
Sure.
lucky.
And I wonder if you felt free to have those kinds of conversations with your dad, where you're like, "Listen, Dad, you're not so smart as you think."
Oh, I'd love to hear my sisters answer that. Look, he wasn't perfect, right? I mean, he never had a dad. His dad died when he was 2.
Huh.
So he didn't have really a role model. And I don't know that he always knew how to do all kinds of things. I mean, he never hit me, for example, but boy, I wish he would. I mean, I don't know if you guys had the thing with wait until your father gets home. So just beat me now. Just hit me now. And you just never wanted to disappoint him. He was, I don't even know how to, he had a gravitas. It's not a word I knew growing up, but when I was in business, I learned this word. It's a, gosh, lawyers use it. It means a presence. It means a gravitas. I don't know other. He had that. And so you just didn't want to disappoint him. But yeah, I told him a few things. I said, if you ever did it like this way, maybe that's another way to think about it. And he'd say things like, "If I need you, I'll send for you."
I love it.
And like I said, he wasn't perfect. He just could not abide. He was just not patient. And we had these 23 little grandkids. He had 23, and he would just have us sit down and we would just read and study and poetry. And, I mean, the kids were gone 20 minutes ago and their parents were like, "Dad," and he would just soldier on. But you know what? I wouldn't change any of that. He also had a way of making you feel like you were more than you were. Uh, he just treated you like you were an adult. If he didn't talk down, there was no condescension. To me, anyway, I don't think others would say the same. He just wasn't his way. His way was to build and lift, and he did the same with us.
Yeah, that's neat. That makes me wonder about you as a mission president, and I'd like to hear more about that. But is that something you tried to emulate as you worked with those young elders and
Yes,
sisters?
absolutely. First night, I sat them down. They were all exhausted, having come off a plane from usually the MTC in Mexico City or Provo. And I would bear them my testimony, and I'd just say, "Look, we're adults here. This is the way this works. I'm not going to give you a big book of rules. We've already got enough rules. And we're just, let's talk about sex. There's not going to be any. Are there any questions?" I meant it actually quite seriously. Plus, I needed to
Yeah.
wake them up. I'd say, we're just not going to do that. It's not why you're here. And if you find one of your members in your ward attractive or another missionary, you're going to call me up, and because it's a natural thing. You're going to call me up and say, "President Hanks, I need to get out of this zone. And we're going to treat it like adults." And then, You're not going to go to bed at 3 a.m. and have me come in. I'm not going to try and catch you. And I think that's a good description of him. He wasn't a catcher, and he didn't teach us about a catcher God. Unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot of LDS folks believe still in a catcher God. Maybe as it applies to others or even to themselves, that God is somehow going to catch me out. I think God is trying to catch us being good. So I emulated him. Yes, I followed exactly what I think he did, which is to have high expectations. I'm not going to beat you if I catch you at 11 o'clock at night. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't be direct about things. Well, I got to be careful here. One of my missionaries, dear friend of mine, he'd been home about 2 or 3 years. He was in Provo going to school, and I called him up. I'll just call him Bobby. I said, Bobby, hi, President, how are you? I said, great. I'd be doing better if you weren't smoking weed. And there's this silence. And he said, how do you know? And I said, I always know. You got 670 of you tattling on each other. How about we do this, Bobby? How about I come down and we flush it all together? Or you just flush it and we start behaving ourselves and acting like priesthood holders together. That's how he was. I'm not trying to, I don't want this to be about me, but that's how he was. He was, you just didn't want to disappoint him because he had such confidence in you.
Yeah, that's neat.
So I have a little bit different question. So as I look at my grandparents' relationship and then my parents and then my relationship with my wife, there's been an evolution in maybe egalitarianism or equality in marriages and things like that. And I can only imagine what it must have been like for your mother to have your dad gone all the time and then the burdens that were placed on her. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how your mom was and how she handled that and how they negotiated that sort of stuff.
That is a kind question of you. Thank you. My mom gets overlooked. She was our hero. She raised us. She was no shrinking violet. She was smart, very smart. She was a school teacher. She could have been other things, but honestly, she chose to be my dad's right-hand woman. Gosh, she was just terrific in all ways. She didn't mince words. She wanted the best for you. So one of my favorite things I ever wrote in my life, and I think I put this in the book too, but I just don't remember, was I wrote something like, gosh, just before she died, I remember saying, sit up and chew more slowly. And what was the other thing? There was a third thing I can't remember. And that was to my best friend, Steve.
Okay.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, and, that's awesome.
It's totally true. It was totally, if you ever said me and her are going downtown, she was in your grill. Because it's not me and her, it's she and I. And done. That's another funny one. Food is done. And I wrote in the book, the Maytag dishwasher repair product manager, if my dad ever met that person, she was going to get a what for it because it says done on the cycle, Food is done. Washing is finished. But she was just great, and she just supported the heck out of my dad. She was just so, but she's no little mousy thing, although it was always funny. My sisters and I were talking about this. He'd come home and she'd throw her arms around him and jump up on his neck, and he'd yell. He'd wait a few seconds, and then he'd yell, "Put me down," which is awesome. I'll just I'm trying not to make this too emotional about her, but Dad got Alzheimer's, and he was sick for a couple of years, and then we put him into a place for another 7 years. So let's call it roughly 8 or 9, 10 years. She might have missed 5 days in 10 years. I mean, she was there. And she just supported him and everything. But when, as you mentioned, when they were young, even when I was up to me, there was nobody else. It was just my mom. And he would obviously check in. I think one of the most, I've never told this story on any of these podcasts, but it's an interesting story. So he's saying goodbye to my mother at the airport, and he's going to be gone for 5 weeks. no internet, no cheap phone, right? This is a whole different, these are letters home. And they are rejoicing at the airport about her being pregnant with my little brother.
Ah.
And then he got on the plane. And so for 4.5 weeks, I guess he was going to Vietnam again. They were writing about the excitement of this new little baby who had died on the day he left.
Hmm.
He got on the plane. My mom went to the hospital, miscarried. And so she received letters of joy and excitement from my dad. And I think that's a touching story, but
Yeah.
obviously I don't have a little brother. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so often in church history, we forget about all the women that make it all possible, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody has to do all of these other things that are, yeah, we just don't talk about them enough.
Yeah. And the other thing I think we forget is that general authorities have hard things happen in their lives. Like, I think we just, and I'm this way too, when I get a calling and it's going to be difficult and it's going to require a lot of me, I assume that I'm going to be so supported and uplifted and have kind of an easy life through that time period. And usually it's just the opposite. That's when hard things actually kind of pour down on you.
He, well, anybody who's been anything in a church, stake president, Relief Society president, whatever, the more responsibility you have over more people, the better the chances are that you're going to get the really hard things.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, bishops hear challenging things, stake presidents hear more challenging things. I would assume, I've never been a general authority, but I assume they have. He would come home visibly affected by whoever he had just spent 2 hours with, and so 40 years of listening to other people's problems.
Yeah.
I think that would take a toll. But he managed to leave it at the door. He managed to get out of the car or walk in and somehow do his best to leave it at the door and come in.
I can only imagine the shocking things being a 30-something general authority, never being a bishop or a stake president. Like when I was first called as a bishop, I was just like, wow, I had no idea so many of the things. I could only imagine going
Well,
from.
I'll blow your mind with some random things. Not that kind of random, but so here he's called, right, and is one of his first stake conferences is to the Pasadena stake with the president of the stake was Howard W. Hunter, later to become the prophet. Gordon B. Hinckley was a secretary, paid secretary in the missionary department. Boyd Packer and Ted Tuttle were church education system supervisors in Brigham City and maybe up in Wellsville. I don't know. And I wrote those in the book just to give people a perspective. If my dad had been called as an apostle instead of as a 70, he would have been the prophet instead of or just after Ezra Tess Benson. And so the only reason I bring that up is because of what you just said. Because can you imagine? You're 31, you've never been a stake president. Here's this powerful man, Howard W. Hunter, who is destined to become the prophet, big time business guy. I think the most interesting story on that particular subject was his big brother Lincoln. And Lincoln was 17 years older than Dad. And so I don't know if you know what a mission tour is. Today, a mission tour is a general authority, usually an area, a general authority 70, and they come and they spend 2 days at your house. They interview smattering 10, 20 missionaries, and then they teach. Back in the day, a mission tour was 3 weeks, and Dad would interview every single missionary, dedicate 9 chapels, do 4 stake conference, whatever. I mean, it was just jam-packed, right? So my dad gets this assignment in the late 50s to go down to see his big brothers, to tour his big brother's mission. So imagine this, a widowed mother gets letters from her 2 sons, one of whom has been a stake president, the president of his company, established in the community. One is this, as my dad said, wet behind the ears, general authority, trying to go down and try to come up with anything important for his big brother to learn. And they both wrote home these sweet letters to their mother.
Well, that's neat.
Saying how awesome it was to be with my brother.
Huh.
Yeah, but to your point, wow. Now it's kind of a stair step. You're elder quorum and then a bishop, and then you become all these different things. And then he just went, and yeah.
Well, so I'm curious about you a little bit. So you raised your kids outside of Utah, it sounds like, and then at some point you
Mostly.
decided to come back.
Yeah, I went to my mother-in-law and said, "Hey, I got accepted to Northwestern." I was a CPA here in Salt Lake with Pricewaterhouse, and I said, "I got accepted clear back east to Chicago." And my first day there was funny, by the way, because all of the guys in the room that had come from Manhattan had gone way out to the frontier to Chicago, and I'd gone all the way back east. So we moved to Chicago for a year and did that, and then I went to work for Frito-Lay in Dallas, and so we had a wonderful time there. Got a new chapel, and um, the city we lived in is Plano. 2 kids born in Plano, but then Frisco. I don't know if you know anything about Dallas, but Frisco now has 300 and something thousand people. Back then, it had one restaurant, and it's not that long. I'm not that old. A headhunter took me to Marriott. I didn't want to go because of the Mormon thing. Ends up there weren't that many Mormons at Marriott. In fact, there were none, almost one or
Huh.
smattering of one or two. And then I spent my career there for the next decade plus, and eventually I got to be a corporate officer, and things were going well. And I was flying over the world and getting no sleep because they built these hotels in different places. I don't know why. And I ended up as the head of sales and marketing, and a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, I know you." I did that for a long time, 6 years. And he said, "I know you're stuck. Bill Marriott's not going anywhere, right? And I'm the next level, and there's nothing." He said, "So why don't you leave that and come work for a little company? You can be the CEO of a new startup computer company." And he said, "And the only tough issue is it's in Salt Lake City." And my wife was like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, ooh." So I brought her home after 16 or 17 years, and we've been back quite a long time. And I became an entrepreneur. I went from big corporations to, so that's what we're doing here. We loved it. And, I got to be home for my mom and dad before they passed, and her mom and dad before they passed. And the kids were in their, junior high and up, mostly junior high and up years. So
So as you visited with people and lived in places other than Utah, what do you think it is that people who don't live in Utah misunderstand about the church in Utah? I mean, specifically members of the church. Like, what is it members of the church who don't live in Utah misunderstand about members of the church who do live in Utah?
yeah, it's an ongoing deal. I never liked that deal, right? When I was from Utah, I'm proud to be from Utah. I love Utah, but I can see where they get it from. Where they get it from is, well, I don't really know, but I would speculate. Here's one of my big speculations: is that those of us who are from here and live here and can be together every Sunday afternoon at Grandma's dinner,
Mhm.
there isn't any of that. Well, there's not much of that usually, especially if you're a transplant. Now, on the other side of that, we made some of our very best friends from when we were young marrieds with little people. All our little people and their little people all loved each other. And then what do you do on a non-big, if it's a huge holiday, I mean, if it's summer, we'd fly home. Christmas, I'd fly home sometime, most of the time. But what do you do on Easter? You're not going to fly home for Easter. So then you go over to your friend's house. And then there's this cohesion that occurs. There's this cohesion that occurs, and you rely upon each other. That's one of the things. I suppose there's others. Um, and
It
then we
was
flew
hard
home, and
though.
frankly, we went right into that mode. And we have twice a month family dinner at our house. The kids all come, and so yeah, we actually have to force ourselves to not do that once in a while, and to invite the neighbors across the street. Whereas
Mhm.
that's kind of happening all the time. And also, we're a minority. I think we're a minority in Maryland. I was surrounded by Asians and Jewish people. My kids all went to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and there's this more of a knowledge of other people here. Again, I don't think it's purposeful. I just think it happens. You go to church with people, so you have to in my opinion, you have to make a specific effort to go out of your way. And the moment you start proselyting, you turn them off, and you should, because why would you? Don't proselyte, just be a good person, and they'll look at you and hopefully see something good in the church. That's Rich Hanks's opinion, but
Yeah. No, it's true. When I lived in Kansas, like the members of the ward were like our family to us, and we would share in family traditions with them because that's who we had, right? We didn't have any other family nearby. And it's harder. I live in Rexburg now. It's much harder to develop that sense of community in our ward than it was when we lived outside of Utah, because we just kind of had to depend on each other a little bit more in Kansas. What would you say to the people that say, I want to raise my children in Utah because it's dangerous and scary in other places?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say I agree with you. Yeah, it's dangerous and scary everywhere.
Yeah.
It's dangerous and scary in Utah. I guess it just depends. I mean, your odds are theoretically better here of finding, but there's good people everywhere. I mean, that old joke about the guy that goes up to heaven and St. Peter says, "Be quiet when we're walking by here." And the guy says, "Well, why do I have to be quiet in here?" And he said, "Because the Mormons are behind that gate and they think they're the only ones up here." And there's something to be said about that. In all fairness, there are good people everywhere. We love our neighbors.
Yeah.
We love our friends and neighbors that aren't LDS. We love the ones that are LDS, and some of them are unfairly mean or taken back from us. My wife and I would never be like they've removed themselves from us, and yet in the Tribune, the Salt Lake Tribune, you're going to get the opposite. It's the Mormons that are the bad ones, and they won't let their kids play with ours. And that hasn't been my experience at all. My experience has been that as I reach out to, and I'm thinking of certain people on my street, and they just don't want anything to do with me. And I never push our religion ever. It's just not something I do. In fact, I shouldn't tell this story, but one of my aunt, or she's actually a cousin's wife, called me up and said, "Hey, one of my granddaughters is moving to your street or your neighborhood, and you are a bishop, right?" And I said, "Yeah, 25 years ago." And she said, "Good. You need to reactivate her."
Okay.
And so I went up to her door and knocked on the door. She opened the door and I said, "Hi, your whatever it was, your grandfather is my oldest cousin. He's been dead forever. And by the way, I'm here to reactivate you. Your your grandma wants me to reactivate you. So this is it. Are we good? Good. We have to talk about this again." And she said no. And I said, "Great. Now we're best. We're terrific friends."
Yeah.
Because of the opposite of what. Anyway, that's just
yeah. Yeah, I like it.
I'll probably get excommunicated for that last thing. Maybe.
I don't think
No.
so. Not even
Okay.
close.
Tell us about your book. What's it called?
The book I named it after a quote. My dad was asked once. What do you want to? What is your goal in life? I think was the quote, and he sat back and he said, "I want to be a friend of Christ." So I put that as the title, "To Be a Friend of Christ: The Life Story," I think, or the life of Marion D. Hanks.
Lovely.
Yeah, and it just came out 2 days ago. It's on Amazon. It's flying off the shelves.
Good.
So far,
Good.
it's probably my sister's buying them. I'm excited about it. I'm excited for people to get to know a general authority that wasn't cookie cutter, that wasn't. That sounded more negative than I wanted. It was really a remarkably different person. His focus on mercy was uncanny, and he changed the church, the face of the church. I mean, the 10 hours we do of service as missionaries, Marion D. Hanks wished it would be 50. Humanitarian service, none before him, and he pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. And he wasn't a big fan of statistics. He was more of a fan of the individual and souls, and very forgiving. Never understood the need for some church leaders to require punishment as a part of repentance. He just wasn't part of his vocabulary as he read the scriptures. And he was he was no shrinking violet. He got a blessing. He came home from England being the mission president, and he was just worn out. And President McKay told him to come down to my office, and he laid his hands on his head, and he blessed him. This without asking. And President McKay said, "Let your voice be heard, regardless if it's in conflict with those around you." And he'd been general authority for 10 years at this time, so you can figure out what that meant. And so he did not hang on to his capital, his political capital, I guess is a way to say it. He basically would spend his his capital to help a person that was needing love. sometimes contrary to what other general authorities were saying and doing and being.
And did you pull from just life experience or journals or interviews, or how'd you do all that?
10,000 letters.
Okay, yeah.
His secretary, bless her, Phyllis, she kept all the letters that he received. And
Huh.
then most of what they weren't, we didn't have the same kind of, there were no Xerox machines and yada, yada when he started. So most of what went out, but not a far lesser amount. And then the people, as I mentioned, the people I wanted to interview mostly are dead,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And so it comes from his journals. He kept very good journals sporadically. When he was keeping them, they were great. And then lots and lots. They're all primary sources. And then a few things that I remembered or my sisters remembered. Or
Is this
like I said, two of his missionaries are apostles right now, and they were both kind and spent a lot of time with me. And then
Hmm.
he has all kinds of friends, and they're all in their 80s, right? So I got to them, but that's what kind of one of the reasons I pushed hard these last 3 years. I'm trying to get to everybody before they're all gone.
So the missionaries that are in the Quorum of the 12, I'm just thinking England. Is that Elder?
Quentin Cook and Jeff Holland, and boy, there's loads more that were leaders. Bob Garf, Hiram Smith, Dick Whitehead. I don't know if you know any of these fellows, but these guys have all been stake presidents and mission presidents, and in a way they attribute. He was their mentor, and he loved them. They were family members. Jeff Holland's been a family member to us for my whole life.
That's neat.
Yeah. So it's fun for him, I think, to see it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this the first book you've ever written?
Oh, no, it isn't actually. I've written joke books.
Oh,
Okay.
all right.
I wrote in all seriousness, I wrote a very well-received business book about customer service. It's on Amazon. It's 2008, so that's 16 years old, but it sold all over the place. Steve Covey called it the best book ever written on customer service, which was helpful in the sales. Um, yeah, but that's a completely different genre. I mean, that's statistics and business talk. This is the first biography I ever wrote, and I did my best. I don't pretend to be a historian. I'm not a historian. I felt like someone needed to write this. I did it for my dad and my grandchildren. If you want to know the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also happy that I think some people will receive it well as they struggle with their crisis of faith as it relates to church leadership. He was very. I mean, I began the book with the words Marion D. Hanks was a believer, and I did that on purpose because there's a lot of things in the book that are the very things that people are leaving the church over.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he knew all those, and frankly, he didn't care. He cared, but he's like, okay, so what? It doesn't change the fact that the Book of Mormon is true, and how it got here, and whether or not there was peep stones and all this business. It was not his way. He just didn't care. He was not an arm of flesh guy. I mean, he'd read Hugh Nibley once in a while, and occasionally he'd say funny things in state conferences, like only the Lord and Hugh Nibley know the answer to that, which got him in trouble probably. But he just preferred to focus on his authority coming not from mythical prop ups. That's right. Sounds. He preferred for his authority to come from the scriptures, and in this concept of that we do in this church of this mythical creation of all these, like he would say to him, he was a temple president after everything else, and to him the temple was a phenomenal experience. But in his words, it's not the continual dissection of the endowment that makes it happen. It's the fact that the five covenants are about Jesus. And so now, 40 years later, guess what they've done in the last 5 to 10 years? Suddenly it's about Jesus. And it's hard for me to not be starry-eyed son
Mm-hmm.
because I can tell you a list of 20, 40, 50 things that he wanted 50 years ago. Like squish together the elders and the high priests. 40 years later, boom. 2-hour church, 40 years later, boom.
Hmm.
And again, it's not that I'm trying to give him credit. I'm just trying to get some people to see that everything, there are people in the church who are following the Lord Jesus Christ, and we don't need to make it any more mythical than that. That's enough of a pedestal, right?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes people on the outside feel like they're the only ones in the fight. They're the only ones aware of the problems. They're the only ones that see things, and don't consider the fact that church leaders see all the same problems.
Yeah, that's silly. I mean, Jeff Holland got up and gave a talk the other day, and he said, "Seriously, you think I don't understand the gay problem? I've spent more hours with gay people than any of you all combined." He didn't say those words, but that's the truth, right? There's no problem that they haven't studied ad nauseum. They may not have answers that make everyone feel great about themselves. Let's take the blacks. I think it's a great one. I'd rather not end on that, but Dad didn't believe in the ban at all, and he would, he spent hours with David O. McKay. He'd go down every, I don't know, twice a year and say, "President McKay, we got to fix this. This is not right." And President McKay would say, "I know, I've prayed, I can't get an answer." So how do you spend 40 years defending something you don't believe?
Yeah.
So your faith, your other part of your faith, which is Doctrine and Covenants 28, there's one man on earth at time to receive revelation. He believed that David O. McKay was a prophet. So he was willing to, he didn't shut his eye on it. He spoke openly and honestly and defended as best he could, but he didn't believe in it. And he would honestly sometimes go to a little bit of a battle.
Mm-hmm.
Some famous ones out there now that I don't have to have me be quoted on, but a black interracial couple, mixed marriage, came in and they brought in Boyd Packer and Marion D. Hanks, and they went at it. Boyd Packer said absolutely not. Marion D. Hanks said absolutely.
Yeah.
You marry who you're in love with. That's in the, 70s. So I could give you lots and lots. I'm just choosing a few that are, more exciting, but there are all kinds of issues where he just chose mercy. He just chose the atonement. And he taught, the atonement rather than a bunch of dogma. Not that doctrine isn't important, but he preferred to choose to uplift and to teach about the Savior and what the Savior taught.
Yeah, that's actually really good to hear. I'm really excited to read the book.
Oh, thanks. I don't
Yeah.
don't blame the mediocre writing, but
Okay.
the subject is great and the words are great. But like I said, I did my best. I just wanted a few of my grandkids to know.
Well, I'm excited. Yeah. And Rich, thanks so much for joining us. It was really great to get to know you better.
Thank you.
And I hope that listeners will enjoy your book. It sounds fascinating.
And I hope the same for you up in Rexburg. May you ever thaw out.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Listener,
Thank
we'll
you.
talk to you again soon.
Thanks.